Most podcasts feel like a Zoom call that accidentally got recorded. There's no flow, there's no plan. The Diary of a CEO feels more like a Netflix documentary that happens to be a conversation. There's a rhythm to it, a structure. That difference isn't an accident. It is a decision. It is deliberate. It is a production. You may not be able to afford that level of production in the beginning of your podcasting and YouTube career, but you can start thinking like a producer, thinking like Steve Bartlett and his team, and producing content with more strategic purpose. Today, I'm going to break down exactly how it's done. And more importantly, how the lessons inside that studio can make you more bookable, more watchable, and more memorable as an expert. This is Think Like a Producer, an on-cam ready presentation. I'm Jamie Maglietta. I'm a television news veteran, producer, a media coach, and founder of On-Cam Ready Media. It is such a great day today. I am so excited to be back at reviewing YouTube podcasts to help you think like a producer and become more bookable. Today, we're launching something new. I am calling this series Through the Producer's Lens, where I review some of the most watched shows and interviews in the world and break down what is working, why it works, and what you can steal from it to elevate your own presence online. Today, we're going to talk about the Diary of a CEO. If you're liking this angle, do subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow us on your favorite podcast platform of choice so you never miss an episode in this series. Links are in the show notes, so let's get to it. If you have never watched The Diary of a CEO, here is what you need to know. Steve Bartlett started it as a scrappy solo podcaster and turned it into one of the most produced, most watched long-form interview shows in the world. Hundreds of millions of downloads and guests ranging from world-class scientists to elite athletes to CEOs to mental health experts. But here's what separates it from other interview shows at this level. It is not the guest list. Plenty of shows have impressive guests. It is the emotional architecture of the show. Every single element, the lighting, the camera angles, the music, the pacing, the questions, it is designed to do one thing: create a moment of genuine human vulnerability that feels cinematic. That is a producer's decision, and it is the one you can learn from. This is the one show my husband will actually fold the laundry to after seeing a clip in his social media feed. So there's something to it. Now, not everyone can afford this type of cinematic quality right off the bat. But there's a rhythm to his podcasting that you can do no matter where you are. So let's get into it.
My mother taught me a lot about just like bringing intention to what you do, and being the child of accomplished parents. Most people thought that I would lack the ambition.
Wow. That's how they start the episode with Ivanka Trump. Now let's talk about the lighting. There's this moody lighting to this episode. Before I dig into all that he offers on these episodes, just look at the visuals you're seeing right now in the open to the Ivanka Trump. It's layered. Now, to create something like this, you need a really well-trained, creative editor. But maybe your son or daughter is learning CapCut and they're starting to get creative. You could task them with this, or a VA. It really depends on how much you can afford to invest. I would love an open like this. I'm just not there yet. And maybe you aren't either. But it should give you some ideas as to how you could be producing out your content a little bit more impactfully. Now, I say that because there's a strategy to everything that this show does. And that is the important part. He's telling our story, pulling the emotional clip off the top. Now, before we dig into everything that you need to know to create your own emotional architecture, within your own show. Let's start with the lighting. In this episode, you can see that there's this glow around her, similar to mine. Very intimate, moody lighting like lamps. There's also this deep shadow contrast. What it does is psychologically give a signal of depth, weight, seriousness. It tells the viewer before anyone says a word, what happened in this room matters. Compare that to a flat ring light podcast setup, which reads as approachable and disposable. The Diary of a CEO lighting says, this conversation is worth your full attention. And we are bringing you a conversation that was pretty intimate. We're bringing you inside our closed door conversation. They cut between wide shots, tight shots, over the shoulder angles, providing a very cinematic storytelling throughout the conversation, too. Wide shots establish the space and the relationship and provide also weaving in those close-ups to provide the closeness to one another. Now, that's the benefit of having an in-person conversation, an in-person podcast YouTube channel. That's hard to do if you don't have the setup or you don't live near anybody. So don't feel like you have to produce and spend a ton of money on producing an episode in person. But you can create that feel within your own space. So, like, for example, I'm using these moody lights that I had in a bedroom. And I said, you know what? Let's just put them in my office for this because I really liked the rotten mango light setup that she uses where there's all these different lamps. So I'm going to build that out myself and make sure to stick around and follow because I will have an episode on that. The moodiness and the dark background really helps it seem a bit more intimate, a bit more personal. I also have gray hair. And when I was sitting against a white background, it didn't really look as flattering because I have all these gray highlights in my hair. They're not actually highlights, they just look like highlights. So you really want to think about the lighting. And here's the other element that this provides. It's in some instances, it's very romantic, emotionally romantic. So that intimacy that I keep talking about. There's also this specific way that Steve Bartlett, he doesn't rush his interviews. Now, if you listen to my Unknown to Known, I'm like, let's get moving. Everybody needs high energy because we want to get you as much information as possible. But Steven, he doesn't do that. He lets the questions sit, resonate, provoke emotion within his guests. Because in an in-person setup, you can do that. Now, you can do it in a Zoom or on a Riverside. I use Riverside, by the way, guys. So if you are looking for a recording platform, check out the link in the description. But, it's very important that you figure out what you are looking to achieve. The best TV producers that I've worked with, they knew how to provoke vulnerability within their guests. It's all about layering the questions. So when you're coming up, if you have an interview podcast and you're coming up with your questions, I highly recommend you say them out loud, feel them. Imagine what your guest is going to say to them. Maybe even rearrange them after you start to get a feel for what might come. Then put them in your prompter or on your note cards and prepare for your interview. It's not a set, by the way, either. It seems like they go to different locations and set up the environment for each guest. But there is no clutter. There's no distraction. Every visual element points back to the conversation. So like if you look at my room right now, my dog, he's behind me. I let him come in and out because he's a part of my life. And if I don't let him in here when I'm recording, he'll just be scratching at my door. But everything behind me is positioned with purpose. I have my book. It's a workbook, a visibility program workbook available on Amazon. I then, on the other side, have additional books. Now, you can't see them because I put my plant on them, but these are books of authors that I've interviewed or worked with. And eventually, if you look at the Rotten Mango setup, there's all these lamps. I'll do something like that too. I have this neon light in the corner that used to be over my shoulder. It just didn't give the right vibe I wanted from my podcast, from my YouTube channel. I wanted it to feel more intimate, more personal, more in my room, in my house. So you need to decide what you want your vibe to be and then light accordingly. Plan your questions accordingly. And you'll start to get a really good sense of what you like and what you don't like. You got to test it out too. So it's worth trying a few guests in your initial concept before you commit. I did that with my Unknown to Known podcast. The first two episodes are like with this purpley pink background. And I was like, why did I do that? But it was because I had bought this neon sign and I wanted to test it out. So you got to do what you got to do. Okay, guys? All right. Now let's talk about the guests because this is where it really gets useful for you. If you are a host or an expert and you're not hosting, but you want to be on podcasts, this little section is where you fit in. So, guests who perform the best on Diary of a CEO are not always famous. They are the ones who come in with the emotional access, those that are willing to let their walls down and share. They are also willing to tell maybe details about their lives or their experiences that they haven't shared before. So they're raw. And that is where he does so well. I just got chills thinking about it. They have a story that maybe has tension, a failure, a turning point, and a belief that goes beyond the grain. Think about the guests, right? There was Dr. Julie Smith, a psychologist who built a massive YouTube following before ever having a book deal. I didn't even know who she was, right? She showed up with a clear point of view, enormous warmth, and the ability to make complex emotional science feel and accessible. She was camera ready. She was story ready. She was trust ready. Or think about the business guests who come in and lead with vulnerability. The moment the company almost collapsed, the decision that cost them everything, the one thing they wish they knew earlier in life. That is not a weakness on camera. That is a connection point. And connection is where the clips get shared, pick up. And connection is what clips get shared, what gets guests invited back, and what gets producers calling. If you want to be the kind of guest that lands on shows like this, you need a story with stakes. You need a point of view with edge, and you need to be able to sit in a hard question without flinching. Here's the part where I want you to stop watching and start applying. No, don't turn off, but just, you know what I mean. You do not need a 7-figure production budget to apply these principles. You need intention. I gave you some ideas on lighting. Add depth to your frame. Move your key light slightly to one side, both of mine are to the sides. It instantly creates dimension and visual authority. A flat, even light setup is safe, but safe doesn't always stop the scroll. So on camera angles, if you are recording content at home or in a studio, vary your shots if you can. A tight close-up, cut into a wider establishing shot. I try to do that, and it's hard if you are using a virtual platform like this. So if you want to take that next step and you have someone to edit, I highly recommend that you use either your phone, if that's all you have, or you invest and get a DJI Osmos Pocket 3. I think it's a DJI Pocket 3, the Osmos. That's what I have, or a DSLR camera, depending on your budget, and get 2 of them. Because then you can have 2 different angles going at the same time recording, and then send those files off to an editor and let them deal with it, or you edit it, depending on your budget. But you can do that. I'm going to be doing more of that for my tutorial videos, so be on the lookout for those. But yeah, you want to have some depth on pacing. Stop rushing your best moments. If you say something that lands, pause. Let it breathe. The instinct on camera is to fill silence. Fight that instinct. The pause is where authority lives. And on a story, before your next media appearance, your next podcast guest spot, your next piece of content, ask yourself, what is the moment in my story that has real stakes? What did I almost lose? What did I have to unlearn? And what do I believe that most people in my industry are afraid to say out loud? That is your diary of a CEO moment. You got to build toward it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Think Like a Producer. And if you have any questions, connect with me. I have a oncamready.com link tree where you can reach out, book a call, or message us. If you think you want to be a guest or you could be a strong guest for my other podcast, Unknown to Known, pitch us. I am really looking for people who post online and have gained press or are authorities within their niche, but are just struggling to become known and have a really good story to tell about landing media and what they did next or what they're doing to try and capture more media, and television news reporters and anchors who can share what it's like to be known and how they got there. I'm trying to bring all these stories together to help you on your own journey from unknown to known. And if you haven't already, be sure to follow this podcast on your podcast platform of choice or subscribe to the channel on YouTube. There's a lot more content there. And find me on Instagram, Jamie_Maglietta. I'll see you online.